Hello, welcome to this next tutorial. This tutorial we're going to start off in Marvelous Designer, but primarily we're going to texture in Substance Painter. I'm starting in MD because I want to show you a few tricks that you can use to enhance your base model and base textures before you actually go into Substance. Let me just turn my fan off. I'm not entirely sure whether you're picking it up, but it's getting roasting in the UK, by our standards at least. So what do we want to do? Well, first of all I want to show you something about seams. So seams, when you're in MD, whenever you sew something together you get a little rendered seam like this, and this is rendered, it's entirely rendered, it's rendered via a normal map. But you may not want that to actually export. You know, when you export your normals, you might not want to show that there's a join there, and that can be, for example, on these sleeve holes. I've got two pieces, and you'll see I've used my little trick, and where the seams join you can barely see it. So that one I can. I wonder if I've done that one. Let's have a look. So that's that one there. So what you do is you get to edit sewing, you select your seam, and on the seam thickness here you can set that to 0, and we should see in a moment or two, once it's figured itself out, yeah, you'll see that little seam has now disappeared. So it's removed itself from the normal map, so when we export the normal map we won't get it, and we don't want there to be 2 bits there. There wouldn't be 2 bits there, there would be 1 piece. Similarly the other side, let's see if I've done that one. Oh, I did that one, I just missed that one. I had left one down the bottom here on the waistband, so this one here, so we can see there's a very clear join at the back. Perhaps I don't want to show it, so I'll set my thickness to 0 and voila, it disappears. Let me go show you how you can actually see. So if I go to the UV editor, and up here normally it's base color, but I've switched it over to normal. So on that seam here, or on the bottom seam, you'll see there's a little kind of purple line. That's showing that there's a normal value there that it's going to render. But on this vertical piece here, which is this piece up here, there is nothing. Another thing you can do related to this is you can enhance seams. So for example, on this waistband, the seam is joining. You see there's the purple line there which indicates that it's going to render something. So if I go back to my pattern window, I can select my seams. Where are they? I think I've got 2 seams on this one. So yeah, there's the front one, and my thickness is 1.5, and if I change that to say 3, it's going to double up the intensity of that normal. So if I go back to my UV editor and zoom in on that piece, we should see that one side of this is much darker than the other. You'll see there's a transition there where it stops, so this normal is more intense. So if I go back and do the other one, where is it? I need the seam. There we go. There we go. So I'll pop this to 3 as well. So I'll get a much enhanced seam there when I take it into my target application, which in this case is going to be DAZ Studio. I will get a much crisper seam there. So, you know, I'm almost, well, I am faking thickness essentially. Okay, so this bottom one I'd like to enhance as well, because that's between the skirt and the waistband of the skirt. So let's make that 3 also. And when I go back to the UV editor, I should see that that's much stronger than it used to be. Well, a bit stronger. You know, if I really jacked the values up, it would, you know, make a big difference. So that's enhancing and hiding seams in our normal map. In the next one I'm just going to go over the general things I've done to prepare this for export and why I've done them. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at this. So what I've done is I've assigned different fabrics to the different parts of my garment here. So and I've basically assigned one per UV tile that I want to use. So I've got a trim which is on my trim pieces, I've got a top which is on this top piece, and then the skirt which is on the skirt, and that enables me to group them together quite nicely. And the reason I've separated the trim out is because I want to get as much texture space on that trim as I possibly can. The trim is where I'm perhaps going to put enhancements, and if they're very very small, then they're not going to pick up nicely in my texture, and they're not going to render nicely. In fact, I might as well not bother. It probably looks worse with them than it does without. So if I go to my UV editor, you'll start out, let me pop this back on base color. If I reset these to the 2D arrangement, you'll see everything is quite tiny for the top, and for the skirt I've got two different pieces. So if I undo that, see what I've done is enhanced what I can do with my trims by giving them their own space and making them bigger. They're out of proportion to everything else, but I'm not really all that bothered at this moment in time, because I want to get the maximum out of them that I can. For the skirt, I've actually not stacked them, but I've put them very close together. So that's this bottom trim and this the actual skirt piece, and then the top itself gets its own. If I combine these with either of these two maps or two zones, they would be too small to get any kind of real detail out of. And I feel strongly that I should be able to put some detail in them. I should be able to think about putting a bit of grain and stitches and such like. So I've made them much bigger and given them their own zone. Okay, so that's that. I've got a little bit to put in next about a material I made a few videos ago, which I'll link somewhere, which I'm going to use to give me the basis for my painting in Substance. So I will talk to you in a moment. So Marvelous Designer has a Substance integration. So if I click in the Substance folder here, you'll see there's a bunch of materials already set up, which you can use to texture your clothing. In fact, if you didn't want to add any kind of details, you could do all of your texturing in here. However, I do want to add some a few things to enhance it, so I'm going into Painter. So all I need to do is say, for my top, I've got this satin SBS AR, which is something I made a few videos ago, as I said, which hopefully will link somewhere. So all I'm going to do is drag and drop that onto my top texture. It's going to rename it, which is annoying, so I'll just rename that back to top. Now this comes in sort of quite large, and I can adjust that. Obviously that it looks a bit like a basket at the minute, but yes, so I've got a metallic kind of shiny strip or thread going through, and everything else is a little bit matte, and that gives kind of a satiny effect. So first of all, I want to come down to my properties. So with top selected, I can come down here and I can adjust the width and the height. I'm going to lock my aspect ratio, and I'm really going to drop those down to say about 15, and that makes it really small. That might be too big still. It might, yeah, see, I can still see something in there, so I'm going to drop that maybe down to 5, and now I've got a really fine kind of thread, which is what I'd expect, I think. I'm also going to change the angle so that the metallic thread is going up and down. There we go. So now it's going up and down instead of left to right. Okay, so that's that. I don't have any settings for colour on this, but basically I'm going to deal with the colour in Substance Painter. Okay, so I want to do similar for the skirt. Now I'm going to make I've made my life really difficult here for texturing. Sometimes you have to kind of compromise, and sometimes you have to make a hard decision. In this case, I was experimenting with a pleat technique, which involved me having a circular skirt, and it works really nicely and I really like it. However, for texturing it makes it difficult, or more difficult. Let's have a look why. So if I drag my SBS AR onto the skirt and then rename it to skirt, you'll see that we get a lot of distortion. You see it's kind of looping around and going all over the place, even though the UV is straight. I mean, the skirt is very much not straight, so you know it's warping and projecting and distorting it. But fingers crossed, once I reduce this down to, what did I say, 5, it will be barely noticeable. There we go. So it's there, but from the distance you're going to view it from, it's not actually going to be all that much of a problem. If you were going to put a tartan on this, a plaid I guess, then that's going to be tricky because it's going to go all over the place. You would have to try like a cylindrical projection, and even that is not going to work super well. So yeah, just bear that in mind when you're designing your clothes. When you get to the texturing stage, decisions you make are going to have an impact. Okay, so that's that for those. I'm going to want a different kind of material on the trim pieces. So let's go up a directory, and I don't want the denim, I don't think. Maybe a fleck. Actually this double SBS AR, double rib rather, I quite like. So I'm going to drag and drop that onto my trim and rename my trim, and then I'm going to zoom in a bit. See, I've got this nice kind of rib effect going on there. It's going to be a bit weird on the arms because they are bent and angled and all sorts, but these are it's another decision essentially. These fit much better if you angle them and bend them, so I've decided to do that, despite the fact that texturing it would be much easier on a straight strip. But let's resize this down, maybe half of the original, to get a nice kind of grain, maybe even half of that. Let's go down to 62. No, that's 32. There we go. I can see that grain. It works quite nice. I have some custom properties, so I should have a colour in there. I'm going to go for a white, because all I really want is the underlying values that I'm going to get this on my normal and the roughness. What I'm trying to say is we'll colour it in Substance Painter. So that's pretty much my prep done. The next thing I'll do is I'll export this model and get the textures out so that we've got something to start with. So I will talk to you in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go to the 2D pattern window, and I'm just going to select everything. Just make sure I've got the transform pattern tool selected, and then I'm going to go File and Export OBJ selected. I have a directory prepared, so let's go there, and I'll just call it, I don't know, cheer for the moment. And down here that should be doing some churning, and I want all patterns, single object, welded, thin, and unified UV coordinates. That's important because then we can get our proper laid out maps out. I'm not actually going to export any textures here. I'm going to export at perhaps DAZ Studio scale because that's where I'm going, and everything else I think is fine. So I'll click OK, and that should export. Now I want to export the textures. So for that I go to the UV editor, and up here we have this little kind of garment with a camera on it, and we click that, and then we need to select our path, and I'll paste my path in there. There we go, and select, save rather. Need to give it a name first. Foolish man. So you give it a name, it's going to add to that depending upon the materials, and let's click save, and that should be good. I'm going to do 4096 because I want lots of lovely spaces, lots of lovely space to texture in, and all tiles. So each of my UV tiles here, you can specify one or none. I'm not going to export the diffuse. I am going to export the normal, the metalness and the roughness, but not the opacity. And then let's click save, and that's going to go and calculate all of our maps and export them out as PNGs that we can use elsewhere. Okay, so I think I've got that directory open somewhere. We can see it filling up as we go. We've got some quite biggish textures, but I think it's worthwhile, for material, for cloth, for example. It's quite a big part of your scene, and your character texture needs a goodly amount of space to get some good detail out of. So it stands to reason that clothes would do the same. It would be a bit like, I don't know, if you made it like a 2048 map, that might be, a quarter of the resolution of your human figure map, and it's like having a JPEG and a PNG side by side, if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. Okay, so that's all exported. Some of these will have nothing on them. Let's just switch this over to an icons. Yeah, see, some of our metalness maps just don't have anything on them, and that's because there is no metal there. Some of our other maps are probably blank as well, so we'll pick and choose what we're going to use. Now, before I go into Substance, I'm just actually going to set this up in DAZ, so we'll do this next. Just going to import it, and so it's there and ready. Okay, so I shall talk to you in a moment. Okay, so I'm in DAZ Studio now, and all I need to do is go to File and Import, and I need to browse to my project directory. It should be there. There we go, and I'm going to import the cheer garment. There we go. So this needs to be DAZ Studio scale, wherever that is. It's here somewhere. Oh, I'm pointing at it. I'll leave all these the same. That should be fine, and I'll hit accept. And there we go. There we have it. Okay, so it's looking pretty nice. I might do a few adjustments later, but I must just clarify before we go too much further. I'm not actually going to, set this up in this video. I'm just getting it in here so I can have a look at it, but also because if you look at if I select it, whoops, let's go to select mode, there we go. If I select it and have a look at the surfaces, they're named horribly, and I want to change that because it just annoys me. Okay, so I can change that quite easily if I go to the grouping tool. So click here, the geometry editor. So in the geometry editor, then get the tool settings up. You'll see I've got lots of face groups, and then I've got the surfaces. So if I make this a little wider, and click plus beside one of them, I can see that it selects the top. So this one is the top. So I'm just going to rename this now, and then click the minus by it to deselect. Oops. No, that's not good. Deselect. Of course it won't. Geometry selection is here somewhere. Clear selection. And then if I click on this one, this is the trim. So I'll just call it trim. And by default, this one is the skirt. So let's call that skirt. So now I've got that straight, I want to export this again. So we'll go to File and Export. Go and find my little directory, and we'll select a format of OBJ, and I'll call it chair with materials, so I know which one it is, and save. Okay, all of this should be okay. Surfaces, etc., and accept. And now I'm ready to actually go into Substance. So we'll do that in the next video. Talk to you then. Okay, so I'm in Substance now, and just a note, my PC is by a long way behind the really great ones out there. So at this moment in time, I think it's advisable for me to actually stop, close some of these programs. So I'm just going to file and save that project. Come on, there you go, and I'll close that because that will be taking up a goodly amount of my graphics memory, or enough of it to perhaps tip me over. So let's close that. I'm going to leave DAZ Studio open for the moment, but keep it in mind that I might want to do that at some point in time as well. And let's just close my email, which is having trouble. Okay, so what we want to do is File, New, and then I'm going to select a project type. We can just go PBR roughness at the moment. PBR metallic roughness alpha blend. I thought there was another one. Perhaps not. PBR metal roughness alpha blend. There we go. And I'll set my document size for the moment at 2048. When I export, I'm going to up-res it, which is really easy and terrific. But for now, we'll have it like that. Now I want my map format to be OpenGL because that's what DAZ uses. And if I click Use Tile Workflow here, it's going to set this up properly when I import my model. So if I then go select, I can go find my directory, and I want the chair with materials. Everything else in here is fine. I'm not going to import the baked maps. I could, but I'm not going to. And then click OK. And there we go, it's in. Okay, so in the next sort of video or so, well, the next video we're going to import those baked maps that we made out of Marvelous Designer, and then we'll get into doing some texturing and enhancing in Painter. So I shall talk to you then. Okay, so let's have a look here. So first of all, what I want to do is bring up my directory which has got all my maps in, and we're going to import these all. So let me just turn this into a type list. Actually I want a view by list. So each of these corresponds to a different area, different texture. So what I'm going to do is select all of those and drag and drop those onto my library. When I do that, this dialog will come up, and if I select them all, which you can do by sort of drag selecting upwards, Actually, this way. I might. Can I make it bigger? Yes, there we go. I need a bit of blank space to do that. And then I'll change those to textures, and I only want them into this current session because I'll probably never use them again because they're specific to a model. So if I import, it's going to import all of these textures. Now I may or may not use all of these textures, but everything's there. You'll notice that it's started to stack them. So you know where I've got this texture here, it's got a 3 beside it, and that indicates there's 3 tiles there that we can use. Okay, so before I go on to actually applying those, we're going to go to the texture set settings and we're going to bake our maps. So if we bake the mesh maps, normal, I don't use ID, AO, position, thickness, and yeah, I'll leave these ones unselected for this one. I'm going to use 2048 maps to match my project size, and that's about it. Yep. So you can adjust these, and we can adjust and rebake later, so I wouldn't worry too much about it now. So let's bake all those textures together. So it's now going to run through a little process whereby it calculates all of its maps, and the maps are really important because without them a lot of the functionality of Substance just doesn't work. It uses curvature maps and AO maps and such like to drive procedurally driven layers, which is all part of the magic of Substance Painter. And you can have a look at them by selecting up here and going down to the mesh maps and say have a look at ambient occlusion, and you'll see there's very little on the top because there's not a lot of obscuring going on, but the skirt, it's got quite a nice AO between the pleats, which we can use later. Let's have a look at curvature. So curvature's a little bit cranky. There's a lot of curvature going on up the top and not a lot going on around the skirt. I say not a lot, it's just that this sort of grey indicates that it's a very gradual kind of angle. So the rule is the flatter it is, the greyer it is. So when the angle gets much more sharp, then in one direction it goes, then the map goes black, and in the other direction the map goes white, indicating that there's a stronger level of curvature. So it doesn't tell you that this ball is curved, it tells you the difference in the angles between polygons. Okay, so whoops, I keep pressing that button, I don't mean to. What else have we got? What else did we do? We did the position, which is basically its position in space. We didn't do height. We have a world space normal, which is its, as it says, world space normal. We have a normal, but it's blank. But it's nice to have a a start, and that's about that. Okay, so let's pop that back to material, and in the next video what I'm going to do is set up these bake textures to give us a starting point. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so this bit's much easier than you might expect because we're using the UV tiling or UDIM tiling. So you can see here we've got our skirt, top and trim under the texture set list, and each one of them knows which UV or UDIM reference it's using. Now these stacks of 3 also know which image is on which UDIM ID. So all we have to do is create, start off with the skirt, we'll create a fill layer, and on that fill layer I only really want normal, roughness and metal, so I'll just untick the other ones. So this is my normal stack. I'm going to drag and drop that onto the normals, and keep an eye on the waistband, because when I let go of that, it's just going to put it in. So it knows which of these images to use and puts the right one on there. Similarly for the metal, if I put it in the right slot, and similarly for the roughness. So that's that. And you might think, well, I've got to do that again now for all these other zones. You don't, because all you have to do is on this layer, if I right click and instantiate across texture sets, it will copy it to the other ones. And because the other ones also know which UDIM tile they are and you know which image to put on it, it just does it for you. So it's perfect. So now we're all ready to go. We've got our imported images, they're on our model, and we're ready to start texturing, which we'll start next. Okay, so let's start with the base colours. Now, it's always good to have an idea of your base colours before you start, because, you know, it just takes a lot of the stress out of things. So I know that I want a kind of a dark blue and yellow. Yeah. So under my fill, or on top of my fill layer for the skirt, I'm going to add a new fill layer. Going to press Alt and Color, because I'm only interested in color here. And then for my base color, I'm going to click in my little color picker, and then I'm going to pick a nice yellow, perhaps an orangey yellow. Actually, no, I don't want yellow for this. I want the blue for the skirt. So I'm going to go for kind of a deep, somewhat dark, possibly desaturated bluish. Now, because this is procedural, you can always come back, but on the basis that this is the colour I'm going to use, I'm going to hit my plus down here to add it to my swatches, just in case I need to use it or a variation of it later. I don't want to have to try and pick the exact same thing. Okay, so that's that, and for the top I want the same, so let's get rid of that base layer there. We'll add a fill. This is my instance. I can't change this here, I can only change it on the skirt. So again, I'm going to press Alt and Color to deselect all of the other channels, pick my color picker, and this time I'm just going to go to my swatches and pick it. I think it's probably that one actually. I thought it would be the end one, it's not, it's the front one. There we go. And let's close that color picker. And for my trim, that's where I'm going to go yellow. So let's get rid of that paint layer, add a fill layer, Alt, click color, and then we're going to find yellow. So I think a goldeny, orangey yellow perhaps. It's quite nice. I might bring that up to be a bit more yellow than orange. And there we go. And I'm going to add that to my color swatches, which is now very obviously added to the front. Okay, so that's our kind of base color, and we're already starting to look a little bit nice. Now this piece down here, down on the skirt, I might want to add to my trim. I haven't, for the simple reason that if I select the skirt, this trim is a big circle right around the outside of this, and had I added that to the trim, it would have really cut down the kind of space that I had for the trim, so I've included it with the skirt. But I do want it to be yellow, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fill layer, and then I'm going to add a black mask, and for this black mask we're going to use the polygon fill tool, and I just want to select that UV down there. Now it is separated, or it should be separated, but we'll find out any second now. So let's do UV chunk. No, it's not separated, it's actually welded, so I'm gonna have to do it kind of manually, which is annoying. So I'll go polygon fill, and I'm just gonna start dragging over this. Had I had a little bit of separation in there, I could have, you know, selected it on its own and saved me saved myself this stage, but I didn't, so yeah, well, that's my own fault, isn't it? Let's have a look, see if I can select some bigger bits. If you select a bit you don't want, you can just go to black and then deselect that polygon. There we go, and back to white again and select. Okay, so I'm not going to do the whole of that live because you'll get very, very bored. But if I switch around to the back and just pan over a little bit, yep, there it is. So this, I'm going to click for the color, and then we'll pick our yellow. So now I've got a yellow trim on here. Okay, so I'll finish that off between things, and then we'll come back and start enhancing this texture with some you know, generators and, you know, filters and procedures. So I will talk to you then. Okay, so one of the first things I do before, you know, after the colour, but before anything else, is just mess it up a bit. Everything is too perfect. So I'm going to start on the skirt, and we'll add a fill layer. Actually, you can name these layers if you wish. It kind of helps. I'm not very good at it, or not very disciplined anyway. So this is base imported maps, and this is my colour, and this one will be my colour trim. Okay, so this one will be my kind of dirtier imperfections layer, and if I right click on that, I want to add a black mask. Okay, so now I've added a black mask, it's letting everything through. Without the black mask, it was completely obscuring. So if I right click here, I want to add a generator, and click on the generator and select dirt. Now this will use a few maps to figure out where to put dirt, and if you slide down to the bottom, you can see the ones it uses. It uses curvature, it uses AO, world space and position. Okay, so let's have a look, see what we can do with this. So this is all a bit too much. I want slight imperfections, I don't want massive imperfections. So I can reduce the level, but that just kind of restricts it to the really strong areas, which is not what I want. I can change my contrast. So if I take it down, it's going to be kind of very greyish and all over, and if I take it up, it's going to be very tight. Again, it's just restricting it to the very strong areas. So what we can actually do is we can reduce our grunge, and we can reduce our grunge scale, but again, it's not doing much. Edge masking, again, it's not going to do very much. And I've basically showed you this one as a reason as to why I don't use it very often. It's tempting, but we don't. But if you go to click on your generator and use the mask editor, we'll get something much more controllable. So the first thing it does is, it by default, the only thing that's got anything on it is curvature. So we can reduce that to, you know, restrict where it's going, or we could even just turn it completely off. We can even go into the curvature options and change how it works. So we can invert it, I don't know what that is, invert it, we can go change the blending mode, we can change the mode, and what I want to go is, instead of having it on edges, I'd rather have it on cavities. So you'll see now, if I turn the strength back up, there we go, it's going into the cavities rather than into the edges. So let me just turn that down a little bit. We also have these guides. See, we have sharp details, fine details, soft details, medium, large, big, huge, and each of these is controlling how much of the map is used. So if I start with the huge, if I turn that right up, you'll see you get an effect. You get more in the huge areas. Actually, if I turn all these off, it will be a bit more visible. I wish there was a turn off all. Okay, so not many sharps. So if I sort of increase huge, you see I get kind of a faint effect in some very large cavities. If I increase big, it's going to zero in and give me a little bit more. If I go large, we're going to get a bit more in those areas. Similarly with medium, but I think I'm actually going to stop somewhere about large. I might even reduce my values a bit, because again, I don't want it everywhere, I just want it to be subtle. Okay, so with that done, we can use some other things. So we've got, you know, a position gradient, we've got textures, and we have some global settings. So global balance currently is at 0.5. Take it down, it will disappear. If I take it right up, it will get very strong, so you can adjust that to how you want it. Similarly with contrast, and we also have a blur, so we can blur it, and I often blur because it gives you a slightly nicer kind of softer effect. There we go. So what I'm also going to do on this is incorporate a texture. So if I turn that right up, pretty much not a lot happens, except it gets rid of what's underneath it, and that's because our texture is empty currently. So in our image inputs, if we go to our texture directory and just take that off there, we have all sorts of procedurals to work with, and what I want is kind of a grungy texture, something like this, which I can drag and drop into that texture slot. There we go, and then I'll slide up, and now under my texture settings I can adjust this. So I can invert it, and as you see, that has an effect. We have a grayscale conversion, we have an overlay. I'm going to try a different version of that. So it helps at this point in time, because it's quite subtle, to switch your viewport to the mask view. So when you see the mask view, it shows you what the mask is, and you know, any changes you make down here will be much more visible. Let's go max lighten. There we go. So now I've got something that incorporates both the texture and our curvature map, and it's a bit all over, it's quite subtle, but we can still, you know, change it. So under the texture we have a scale option. So if I scale that, you'll see that the base gets smaller. We can also increase our contrast to get another effect. We can even include the brightness, just to get a nice balance between our bake map and our texture. So you can see these kind of slices here, they'll be the bake map, because you know, they don't look like the image at all. And if I change the scale, you know, you can see what the image is contributing. There we go, something like that perhaps. So you can combine your various channels, you know, and bake maps and effects with images to, you know, get an effect. And if I now go back to the material, you'll see that it's got kind of a greyish haze over it, and that's all controlled by this layer. So we can go colour, height, don't need normal opacity, I'm going to go, yep, there we go. So roughness and colour. So colour, I want to pick a variant of my original blue. So I'm just going to pick that original blue, and then I'm going to darken it up a bit. There we go. And for my roughness, I'm going to switch to the roughness view. That's what it looks like currently. And then I'm going to adjust down here. So if I take this down or up, it's going to have an effect. And essentially what I want to do is, you know, without this there, it's got a certain level, and I want to bring my little slider up just so that my patches have a slightly different view. See, up here it's very white. If I drag that down, I want to drag it down until it just about disappears and everything is even. There we go, somewhat along those lines. Okay, so let's go back to our preview, and that's what we have. It's probably quite subtle. If I get a nice angle on it and turn that layer off, we should see some sort of change. If you don't see a change, then it's likely that you probably haven't been harsh enough, and you know, I can be guilty of that. So let me turn this right up. I can see there's a lot of you know, brightness going on in there and not so much in other spots. And if I take it back down, you'll see it gets much brighter. See this patch here? See, it's very, very shiny at the moment, and the higher I go, the darker it gets, or the less reflective it gets, which is the idea. Okay, so question is, can this be used on another layer? Can I just instance it over? The answer is sadly no, because you know, I know that I don't have quite as good a AO map on my top, which is where I would like to go next. So I'm going to need to try something slightly different. So we'll have a go at that in the next one. Okay, so instantiating this wouldn't be the best idea, but I can use it still. So if I right click and copy and then say go to the top, I can right click and paste that layer back in and it will apply it, but it probably won't do an awful lot. If I turn it off, it's doing something, but not an awful lot. Okay, so if I switch over to the mask again, we'll see what's going on, and yeah, not an awful lot. Let's click on the actual mask editor. I've switched over to yeah, so that's what it's doing, and yeah, it's not bad, but it's not actually you know, all that much fun. If I go to the curvature, I can turn that off completely, and you'll see that it's actually having not an awful lot of effect. If I turn it right up, you'll see it, you know, it's highlighting places, but you know, not necessarily the right places. So you'll notice that last time we did cavities, if I go to edges now, it will have a much bigger effect around what it considers to be edges, and we can adjust that with our large, big and huge to, you know, damp it down a bit. And we could even go in and, you know, add some other levels to it if we wanted to, which I don't, because there's a lot of curvature going on and it's not necessarily exactly what we want to happen. So this is going over quite a lot of it at the moment, so what I'm going to do is come up, I'm going to decrease my blur a little bit. So the blur was sort of masking out some of the imperfections. I'm just going to jack that up a little bit. I'm perhaps going to take the balance down some. There we go. So this is going to be shinier over the top. It's going to have the normal you know, map on there, and then it's going to take on the layer properties for the other bit. So let's have a look at it, see what it looks like on the material. Looks like a very subtle effect. If I turn it off, yeah, it's extremely subtle. So we can go back to the mask editor and perhaps mess around with it until, you know, it does something that we want it to. If I take that back, take it up, see, the further I go up on there, you'll see the darker and darker it gets. Have I got colour on that one? Yes, I do. Yeah, I forgot I put colour on it. Which is, yeah, we don't want that. So I'm going to sort of par that back until it's somewhat, or looking somewhat how I want it. I think it's having too much of an effect, so I'm going to come down and take some of these large values out. For something that's got a lot of curvature, it's going to, you know, have a big impact on the on your mask. So there we go. Now the other thing is that if your effect is too strong, you can still change it. Yeah, you might have it in the right places, but perhaps it's too, you know, too much. So over here on the layers, we have our sort of layer, how can I put it, mode. It's in base color at the moment, but if I go to roughness, I can change A, how it blends, and B, how much it blends. So this is at 100%. If I turn it to 0, that's, you know, the maximum. Well, it's not there at all. So I can actually just adjust that until it's just right. There, somewhere around there, I think. There we go. So it's still shiny, but it's not as shiny as other parts of the garment. If we go to the roughness view, you'll see, you know, the lighter values are less shiny, the darker values are more shiny, and I think perhaps want to bring that down a little bit. Sometimes it's good to use this view just to get a nice subtle blend going. There we go. Okay, so that's that, and I can actually copy this one and pop it in the trims. So let's pop it in there. I'm going to need to change my colour. Well, I don't actually need to change the colour, I could leave it as it is because it's just kind of messing up the yellow a little bit, but actually I want to, you know, go to add our original yellow, and this time I'm going to make it a little bit more orangey and perhaps darken it up a bit. Doesn't appear to be doing an awful lot, but we can have a look at the mask, see what it's doing. So let's change over to the mask view. Yeah, the mask is essentially black, so let's go in the mask and have a look. Oops, back to the mask. Okay, so yeah, it's got some variation in it, but again, we can always give it a tweak. Again, it's a different area of the model, it's going to have different kind of curvature properties and different maps to work with. If we increase the curvature, yeah, we can open the curvature and change our small, medium and large. Perhaps if I take those down, it might be wise to go into the sharper end of the deal. Let's take big and large out completely. Just adjust these down a little bit. There we go. Again, I could reduce the blur, then we'll get the max. I'm going to increase it up just a little bit, change the balance. Yeah, so balance at the top is not a good idea, and we can change the contrast a little bit just to make them a little bit more distinct. And then if I go back to my material, turn it off, turn it on, I can see it. It's very subtle, but that's what I want. I don't want it to be, you know, massively obvious. I want it to be, you know, a little bit on the you know, subtle side. I think this is quite a rough area anyway, so let's go and have a look at the roughness. Yes, it's almost pure white. So if I take the roughness of this layer down a little bit, of course we've only got a 20% mix on that, so let's take that up, and now I get a little bit of difference. There we go. Back to the material, and let's have a zoom out and have a look. Okay, so I mean that's the sort of basic prep for our base layer. We're going to sort of work into details next. I'm going to, you know, put a design on it, and then we'll see where we go from there. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so next then I want to add a simple design to this, nothing too fancy. So on the top, I'm going to add a new fill layer, and then we'll add a black mask to it, and right click on the black mask and we'll add a fill, and this is going to allow us to use a texture and manipulate it to have some sort of design for us. So what I want for this is a grayscale image, so I've come to my textures and slid down, or I will slide down until I find this gradient linear. Now this is very handy because we can manipulate it, we can make it thinner, we can make it sharper. So I'll drag and drop that into the view. Now what that does is basically put it in the wrong zone for me. So what we're going to do is first we'll change our repeat value to none, and then I'm going to drag and drop it over to our tile, our UDIM tile, and when we get there I'm going to use this scaling thing here, or you could use the UV transform there to turn this into a thinnish stripe. Whoops, that's the wrong way. There we go. Okay, and then I'll use the rotation to rotate it one way or the other. Whoops, that way. So I want it to end up kind of crossing the shoulder point there, but not so far that it goes all the way around. Whoops, I meant to rotate there. There we go. So now we have a stripe going down here which we can control with this material, and just for fun I'm going to put a gold on this. Well, all I need to do is type gold in the search. Don't know why I'm messing about, and then just select it and it will put it on. There we go, providing you have the layer selected. Okay, so this stripe I want to repeat on the back, so what I'm going to do is select it, right click and copy, and right click and paste, and now I've got two. So I'll select the other one, and now I can move it and re-rotate it so it fits on the back, and I want it to overlap that shoulder piece again, but I need to make it a little bit smaller so it doesn't overlap with my other island. So let's just have a look round. I think I accidentally made it a bit thicker while I was doing that, so I'll just thin that up a bit. Perhaps move that over. There we go. So now I have a stripe going around the other way. Now I'm just making sure that it's not going over a seam, because that will cause me some grief. So there we go. Okay, so now I can change this gold and do whatever I want with it. I can make it a bit duller so it's more material like rather than pure metal, and if I zoom in we should see there's still some fabric in there. Yes, there is. Okay, so that's a stripe, but it's not very interesting on its own. So what we can do is duplicate this layer and change the material. So let's duplicate the layer, right click duplicate, and this time I'm going to go silver. I'm not a very good designer, so bear with me in terms of colours and things. So I've switched that to silver, and as you can see it looks silver now, but that's just because it's overlapping the other one. What I want to do is go into my mask and make this strip thinner. So now I've got two strips, and similarly on the back, if I select the other one I can make that one thinner too. There we go, and now I've got a two-toned stripe, which doesn't need to be black and gold and silver. It's just my kind of the first thought really. Let's try something else. One I use quite often is plastic matte, because it's kind of a good start point. So if I grab that, select the colour, go for my original blue, you'll see it's coming up differently because the materials are of different properties, so it has a contrast to it, but I could also darken it up a bit just to make that a little bit more interesting. Okay, so I could also create 2 more of these layers. So I mean the gradient layers. So if I right click and copy and right click and paste that one, I can simply grab it and move it to the other side. And now we've got a double-sided stripe, and I'd need to do the same on the back. Copy and paste, and then grab it and move it to the other side. There we go. Not sure that gold really goes very well. In fact, it doesn't. So I'm going to select on that layer, and I'm going to put my original yellow in it, and just have a metallic yellow, which is very similar to the original yellow. Okay, so I mean that's you know, the very basics of it. We could perhaps do a little bit more, but you know, I might be here for years or hours doing it. You know, every little thing, and I don't want to overwhelm you. What I'm going to do next is I'm just going to export all these maps, and then we're going to set them up in DAZ Studio. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so we want to export now. So we go to File and Export Textures, and here we have the template we're going to use for output, which we'll look at in a second, and then each of our materials. So if we go to the output templates, we've got our PBR metallic roughness here, but we need to just update it a little bit for DAZ, for other applications as well, depending upon your normal format. So I'm just going to make a copy of this up here with the copy button, and then on this copy we can rename that. Whoops, I'm sure we can rename it. There we go. I'll call this one I don't know, OGL, so I don't overwrite my previous OpenGL one. And then up here we need to change our channels a little bit. So first of all, I'm not going to export the emissive almost ever. The height I don't really use, I use the normal instead. So we've got base color, we've got roughness, we've got metallic, we've got normal. So for the normal, if you look at this little color code here, it's grey. It's picking up a converted map which is DirectX. We want it to be OpenGL. So if I drag and drop that on there, and we can go from RGB channels, and now we're set up to use the OpenGL channel, which is perfect. So we've got RGB, we've got a grey for roughness, we've got a grey for metallic, and we've got the RGB for normal and colour space. Perfect. So as I say, green is base colour, we've got this dark purple, which is the roughness. So you can easily pick up, you know, what you're actually, you know, exporting. If you want to export any of the other maps, you can add a new channel down here. So we can create, for example, a grey channel, and perhaps I'll call this, well, let's make it the AO, the ambient occlusion map. And from our mesh maps, I could also do that one. So I'll get it from the grey channel. So this would export our AO map, and we could use it, you know, as we wanted to. Just wanted to show you that, just to you know, so that you knew. So let's turn that off, and I'm going to go back to my settings, and from my list we should now have PBR metallic roughness OGL. We can see which channels are going to be exported for each, and here I'm going to up-res my textures. So substance, basically you can work in one resolution, so you can work in 1024 to save space, but at any time you can up-res it or down-res it, and it will recalculate and recalculate, but it won't lose detail. So yeah, even if you've painted at 1024 or textured at 1024, when you up-res it, you'll get more detail. So let's change this from that to 4096 because I want lots of nice, you know, texture space. I have a tendency to put my padding at dilation plus diffusion, and I'll just take that down a little bit just so it's not, you know, too overwhelmed, and should be good. Sorry about that, bit of a motorcycle. If you don't want to export any of these maps in particular, then you can always untick them here. Yep, so if I had included my AO and I didn't really want it, I could untick it there and it wouldn't export. So back to our global settings, I need a directory, and fingers crossed I've got this here still. I'm going to create a new directory here, and I'll just call it SP textures so I can collect them together. There we go. Let's copy that as text, and then I'll paste it into here. There we go, and select folder. So I've got PNG 8 bits. I'm using PNG again to get better detail. I haven't done a particularly detailed, you know, example, of course, but you know, I still like to have the you know, the crispness on the normal map and so on and so forth. So yeah, everything's good. So if I hit export now, it's going to go away and start calculating my outputs. There we go, and I can cancel at the end and go and have a look in that directory. Here we are, we've got all of our textures here. So let's pop this into a large icons, and we can see all of our textures all ready and raring to go, and each one of them seems to have something on it, which is perfect. You know, it's actually this metallic one doesn't, but that's that. So I've got my normal details in there, that's nice. I've got my metallic there for that strip. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so in the next bit we'll add these into DAZ Studio, so I'll talk to you then. Okay, so I'm back in DAZ Studio, and I'm just going to select the normal selection tool and make sure I've got my cheer dress selected, and then on the skirt material we're going to start to import our pieces. Now let's have a look. So first of all, I'm going to do the normal map first, so I'm going to open that. We'll go to basics and bump, and then we've got normal map, and I can browse in there. Should come up. If I paste my directory in, should give me a good start. There we go. So we are on the skirt, so I want the normal map for the skirt. So I've got cheer skirt with material zones, skirt normal 1001, and I'll pop that on. There we go, and I'm in quite a plain view here, so let's go to the rendered view. There we go. Yeah, I moved it, and you can see there's kind of a bright line down there where it's picking up that seam that we added and we enhanced. So you know, we can see it's working. There's even the seam at the bottom. I can't tell you how much these, you know, maps really enhance it. So let's do the same for the top. So let's go to the top. There we go, top, and base and bump and normal and browse, and now we want the top normal. Okay, and there we've got our seams in again, and let's do the trim. So it's under base, bump and normal. I prefer to do it that way because I'm not very good with long lists of things. I can't see what I'm looking for no matter what. You know, it might be right in front of me, I have trouble seeing it. So I like to, you know, go down these things here. So, and there's our trims. There we go. So that's really enhanced that there, because we've got the trim and the skirt normal coming together to make that seam. Okay, so what else do we want? We want on the base, we want the diffuse and the base color. Let's browse that. So this is the skirt, so let's pop that in there. No, it's the top. I'm completely the wrong one. Let's switch that over to the top. Cheer top. There we go. And oops, let's go back in here again. Now I'll do the skirt, diffuse, browse, and pop that in. There we go. It's getting a bit confusing now. So diffuse, base, diffuse, sorry, browse. What I'm on? I'm on trim. Let's make sure I get the right one this time. There we go. So yeah, it's starting to look right, but obviously it's way too shiny at the moment. So we need to adjust that. So that's not under base, I don't believe. That will be under not geometry or top coat. No, perhaps it is under base. It's definitely not under top coat. Is it under volume? No. Oh. Diffuse reflection, that's what I'm after. No, not diffuse reflection or overlay. I'm having a moment. Somebody help me. Glossy, that's what I'm after. It's just I couldn't see it. Okay, so in glossy roughness we can go browse. I'm on the trim, so I want the roughness for the trim. Cheer, trim, roughness, that one there. We just need to make sure that that's up to 1 so that it applies properly. So let's not mess this up. So glossy, I can even go down a little further and find the right one. There we go. So glossy roughness and browse. This is the top, so I want the top roughness and set that value to 1. And then we need the skirt, so diffuse, not diffuse, glossy, and whoops, reflection, glossy roughness, browse, and where are we? What's my brain doing? We're on the skirt. Skirt roughness, there we go. And turn it up to 1. There we go, it's looking a bit more sensible now. Okay, so we also need some metallic stuff going on here. So where is the metallic channels? Metallicity. So under diffuse we want metallicity, and we can browse to that, and I want the metal matte this time, and set the value to 1. And we need to do the same for the top, of course. So under diffuse, metallicity, browse, this is the top, before I get too confused. There we go, and set the value to 1. Now we can see that's really picking up that metal stripe now. And similarly for the trim, although I don't think there's anything on this map. We go to diffuse, metallicity, browse. Yeah, there isn't. But if I make it black and make it 1 anyway, at least I'm being consistent. Okay, so there we go. We have our nice little cheer outfit, textured in Substance and imported back into DAZ. Or not back into DAZ, into DAZ, and set up, and you know, ready and raring for some poor soul to go through the setup process of conforming it and, you know, turning it into something that works. Which isn't me for today, because that would be another 2 or 3 hour video. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please ask me below. I hope you get something out of it, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon.